right now. And so our position has been that over $10 million budget and supervising employees were kind of expected of the fiscal manager. There was another position, it's a union position called fiscal coordinator. And I think that was the HR director's recommendation that we use that. So the issue we're concerned about, obviously, is if we create this as a fiscal manager position, there are probably 5 other fiscal coordinators in a similar situation. And the other issue is, I believe, and I guess this is funded entirely by WIOA, but we also provide county funds of about $100,000 a year. And I know that it depends on how you break it out. So I think our recommendation was we'd like to go with a fiscal coordinator as opposed to a fiscal manager.
Points that I found compelling from Elijah were the fact that there's 9 staff members, but in the summer there's 59 staff members. The complexity of the reporting to county, state, and federal entities. And keeping different books for different purposes. This particular person has a tremendous decades of experience, but in terms of the position itself, I think those are compelling to me. Did you want to say something, Liza?
Thank you. I will also add that, like I said, although it's a smaller department and a smaller budget, I don't think that means less work. I think our work is very tedious. As I shared, there are 14 different payroll codes for different people for different purposes. And it's really about quality and not always quantity. We are providing a service to the public when we have 40 youth, for example, enrolled right now in our summer youth employment program and college interns, and that is free help for local businesses, municipalities, and agencies. I don't think the coordinator job description, which I have if anybody would likes to see it, includes the work that is in the fiscal manager position that my current account manager is performing.
We have a request to reclassify, I think, account manager to fiscal manager with some recommendations that perhaps that should be fiscal coordinator instead of manager. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll ask the question for the requested resolution as written now, which is to create a new position of fiscal manager. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 Sorry, maybe we could do a roll call. They did? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. Any opposed? That measure passes. General workforce updates.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the Board of Supervisors for your support. I wanted to share unemployment rate numbers and then some other workforce updates. In April 2024, our unemployment rate was up a little bit. And that's normal. It goes up in the winter and then starts to come back down. So in April, we were 4.2, and the May numbers just came out this past week. We are at 3.6, both with Warren County and Glens Falls metro area, both at 3.6. So like the pattern, it is going down in the summer. We still have a lot of jobs available, but most of the employers I'm speaking to are in better positions than they were in the last couple years. And we're extremely proud of the spring job fairs we do and the summer youth employment program that is getting more workers out. We are continuing to partner with Access VR, SAIL, making sure that anybody on the sidelines who is able to work and wants to work knows about all of the local jobs that are still available. So our unemployment rate is lower than the New York State average, which right now is 4.2. And again, anything under 5% is considered full employment. We had our youth orientation yesterday for all of our summer youth workers. They do represent mostly Glens Falls and Queensberry. We have 18 students from Queensberry, 13 from Glens Falls, 3 from Warrensburg, 2 from North Warren, 2 from Luzerne, 2 from Johnsburg, and 1 from Brant Lake, who is a homeschooled student. All of these youth are placed at work sites that are close to their home, or if they have transportation, and it's definitely one of their top, they get one of their top 3 choices for their work site. 14 of our youth are returning, which is great. They're in their 2nd or 3rd year with us. They continue to gain professional skills and technical skills, and they're making connections with businesses and organizations that we hope will lead to long-term employment and them staying here. I attended the BOS signing day event in early June, where youth who are going directly into the workforce after high school are signing with their employer. And there were several Warren County businesses there, which was great to see. And then Warren County students, primarily from Glens Falls and Queensberry school districts. We continue to see an interest in the trades. We continue to push the trades. There is a girls' camp this summer for girls in the trades. They are still enrolling for that, so we are promoting that heavily. And although there is tuition, we do have some flexible money to help pay for any young ladies who would like to attend that trades camp. Our GED class finished up for the year. We did have some more students pass their GED class. We had one young person miss it by 1 point, so they're studying to take it again. We still have a waiting list for our GED class. That is youth age 16 to 24. We again still see most of those students are from Glens Falls dropping out. And we are in discussions with the school district, with BOCES, trying to get a second GED class, hopefully going in the evening for the fall, so that we can get more of those kids off of the waiting list. These are the biggest things we're working on right now. The summer youth employment program will be really busy July and August. That's our primary focus. The celebration awards picnic is August 9th. All of you will be invited. You'll receive an invitation. And we look forward to celebrating youth and giving out some awards at the end of the summer. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has about the state of our workforce.
Hearing none, we'll wrap up with workforce development. Any public comment before we move on to the planning department? Planning department agenda, we have 6 requests in front of us. We'll move right into the first one, which is to enter into a new contract for the administration of the store program. County planning department secured $200,000, which they've done in the past, and they're looking to enter into a contract to have a third party administer that. Is that right?
That's right. So we applied for restore funding. It's $200,000 to make emergency repairs for seniors, qualified incomes. This is very much in line with our housing needs assessment that we completed in October. It's a way of, retaining residents and connecting them with the state and federal level resources that they need to stay in their homes. We found that we have existing partners in our region that can run these kind of programs very efficiently. They have staff and capacity. So we solicited proposals from qualified organizations to do this work, contingent upon the fact that they're serving Warren County residents and coordinating with us on how they sort of advertise and solicit participation in the program. So we'd like to award this to Rebuilding Together Saratoga. Excellent track record, 30 years experience doing this, great staff. We have every confidence in them that they'll be able to efficiently get this money out to the community. And we hope to even continue this partnership with them going into the next year, another round of funding. So.
And their cost will be taken from the 200, is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. So no cost to the county. They have project delivery fees cooked into this $200,000 lump.
Any questions?
Thank
Or
you.
actually, can we get a motion to bring it on the floor? Mr. Cressito, Mr. Stroud, the second. Mr. Cressito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a match to the homeowner? It's 100%?
This is 100%, yeah.
100%.
So, and it's so as long as they're qualified for lower and moderate income. And the Rebuilding Together Saratoga, the entity that we want to work with on this, they will be vetting all the applicants, going through the paperwork with them. And the whole idea is like, if somebody has an emergency repair, a senior living on a fixed income, something for a working family that could cost $5,000 would be, hey, we can manage it. That could be a crippling financial blow.
Oh, yeah,
So there's no matching requirements.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Ethan, on the form, it says 195 and on the agenda it says 200, a difference of 5,000. Can we-
Oh, yes,
195?
excuse me on that one. We have $5,000 retained for our own administrative costs on that. It's a $200,000 program total though. So project delivery fees will be going to rebuilding Saratoga. The total award amount was $200,000.
But to end the contract will be for 195. is that right?
Yes, yeah. And that's all outlined on the proposal. We'll work on that contract language with the
Thank you.
editors.
Other questions? I'll call the question to enter into a contract for 195,000 for the administration of the Restore program. Please say aye.
All right.
Any opposed? That carries. We'll go into number 2, which is applying for grant funding through the Department of State's BOA program.
So New York State Department of State has been running the Brownfield Opportunity Area Program for over a decade now. I think pretty familiar with the Brownfield programs. This program, the town of Queensbury and the city of Glens Falls have been participating in this. It identifies concentrations of underutilized properties that have real or perceived environmental contamination. And the idea is that these properties are causing underinvestment in the community. Let's have resources from the state come in and try to figure out how to reprogram these properties so they come back into productive use. There's been a deficiency with that program. Department of State has been made aware of this, is that it didn't favor rural communities. So nowhere in Warren County, aside from Queensbury and Glens Falls, have we tapped into these funds to rehabilitate vacant and underutilized properties. Department of State listened to that and they presented this new program. This is the second year of doing it. And this is pre-planning activities. And it allows a county to go and try to develop an inventory of all the properties scattered across the county that may or may not be underutilized because of real or perceived environmental contamination. The outcome of this planning process would be a data set of potential properties that we should be looking at possibly for further action or considering entering further into Brownfield Opportunity Area programs. And I think Supervisor Stroud or anyone from Glens Falls can attest to the value of those programs, both in the South Queensbury BOA or, Warren Street in Glens Falls. So the really attractive part about this program is that it's 90% funded through the state. 10% local share is required. The local share we propose contributing via staff time. As you know, Sarah Frankenfeld has immense GIS capacity, capabilities. We want to leverage a lot of our skills in order to conduct this program, right in line with the Department of State work plan, and also, receive a considerable amount of financial incentive to just do this work, which is nice because it aligns with all of our priorities as a department. And the reason that we're asking for this specific resolution today, I know we asked for authorizations last month to submit applications to CFA process. This requires a standalone resolution. So ask for your support for that one, or if you have any questions, please let me know.
So the ultimate deliverable from the project is a inventory of all brownfields, whether contaminated or perceived to have contamination,
Right.
that are abandoned
Yeah.
throughout the county.
Yeah.
And they're.
Or even, sorry to interrupt, even underutilized too.
Sure.
Pardon me.
Yeah, the definition of brownfield is sketchy.
Yeah, and I think that's what people get hung up on. It's real or perceived environmental contamination. You can think of all examples like, we have a brownfield in Johnsburg on the corner of county property that was a gas station, the Mullen property. There's various, even Chestertown, there was a old garage, and there's all these sites scattered around. We just want to figure out if they're actually good candidates for further state programming. And it's just a way to connect communities with more resources.
And we'll add a significant layer to our GIS library.
Yeah.
Somebody want to bring a motion to bring this to the floor? Mr. Mayday on the first, Turner on the second. Any discussion? All those in favor of applying through the grant funding, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. Number three, is a transfer of funds to cover about $4,000 in overtime, planned overtime.
Yeah, this is planned overtime for one of our administrative positions. It's a longstanding arrangement that we have, and we have a budget for it in our salaries.
Somebody want to bring this to the floor? First by Mr. Mayday, second by Mr. Stroh. Any discussion? We'll call the question. All those in favor of transferring funds to cover overtime, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That carries. Number four, increase capital account H 18 with regard to the septic replacement program.
Yeah, so we were awarded an additional $400,000 to the New York State DEC septic replacement program. This is our third round of funding. This is a $10,000 incentive that goes to eligible properties along water bodies. The first two rounds of our funding for this were limited to Lake George. I believe this committee, as well as some other folks, had communicated to policymakers and people in the program that we wanted expanded eligibility because in Warren County, as we know, Lake George isn't the only water body. That's a critical importance. So the DEC in turn, they gave us less money, but they gave us further eligibility. So we just need to basically accept this funds, put it in the account, and then disperse it as we have been past few rounds of funding. We recognize that this, while it seems like a lot on paper, it's really a drop in the bucket for need that's out there. But we have been, thanks to the hard work of our staff, been very expeditious with getting these funds out the door. So we just want to just keep this program running.
How much was secured in the first two?
I think it was 375, the first one, or 325, then the second one was over 600, almost 650. And the numbers varied based on participation from other counties. But this is, it's a funny thing because we're looking at a pretty significant issue in our region where water quality is so critically important, but most of the homes were built, 30, 40 years ago. These systems age out and fail. So this is significant and growing need.
Somebody want to make a motion to bring this to the floor? Mr. Mayday on the first, Ms. Turner on the second. Any other discussion? I'll just say it's a testament to the department to keep securing these massive grants to support our county. I'll call the question. All those in favor of increasing the capital account, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Number five is an IMA with the city of Glens Falls related to some Esri software that Sarah could probably walk us through.
Yep, so we have an existing intermunicipal agreement with the city of Glens Falls. Basically, we just manage the licenses for the GIS. It's more efficient to manage them in a centralized fashion, allows us to provide technical support to cooperating municipalities. So the city of Glens Falls has just added a GIS technician, and they are moving towards having more field workers use GIS. They would like to purchase additional licenses. So we just need to update the dollar amount in that intermunicipal agreement with the city. They will be covering all the costs. This is just allowing them to spend more money on licensing.
Kind of a pass through.
We're a pass through. Yep.
Can somebody make a motion to bring this to the floor? First by Mr. Strauss, second by Ms. Turner. Any further discussion? All those in favor of updating the IMA with the city of Glens Falls, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. And lastly, amending a budget for the GIS software. Sarah.
Yeah, so this is just to accommodate that increased amount. We're updating our revenues and our expenses, so it will be a wash in the end, but we have to update our amounts in the budget to cover those increased costs for city of Glens Falls and also Lake George Village.
Does somebody want to make a motion to bring this to the floor? First by Mr. Mayday. Second by Mr. Stroh. Any discussion? All those in favor of amending the budget related to GIS software expenses, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Into discussion items. Where do you want to start?
Just really briefly, I'm very pleased to announce the two new staff members of the planning department. We've got David Nelson, AICP, principal planner. He came to us from Cayuga County. He's got a lot of experience. His experience and interest align very much with what we're doing as a county. And we also have Matthew Smith, who came from the Tug Hill Commission out of central New York, or we call it Western New York. Yeah, in any case, both of these guys have, level of professionalism, experience and perspective that are adding a lot already to our department. They've been here for just a month and under a month, and already they rolled up their sleeves and they made a really positive contribution to our work. So you'll be hearing from them more. On that note, speaking of some of their work, I'm going to very quickly just mention a couple of the grants that we're going after this funding cycle. First one, we're going for an additional $400,000 for septic replacements through the Community Development Block Grant Fund. It's federal funds, interesting program. We will be applying for another $200,000 through Restore due in August. This is the same fund that we're using for the emergency home repairs for seniors. We've been working closely with DPW Parks and Rec on the North Creek Railway Station. There are funds through the Office of Parks, Historic Preservation and Recreation. Incredible asset, that rail station, but as a historic building, there's a lot of needs. So we're pursuing funds to rehab the roof and some of the siding on it. Really just trying to build up our relationship with that funding agency. Also working with the DPW on brining equipment. We've been a big part, Kevin Hajos has been a huge champion of the Road Salt Task Force. There's state funding out there to reduce the amount of salt going into our waterways. We want to help the highway departments get brining equipment. Really important for water quality. You've heard about the Brownfield Opportunity Area Program. And the other big one is sort of a nice testament to the continuity of planning initiatives. We're Climate Smart Communities Bronze Community, certified bronze in New York State. 2 years ago, our department submitted a grant for an organics management plan to sort of evaluate if there's better ways to handle otherwise compostable waste. That study is complete, and now with Scott Royal, Kevin Hajos, and Matt Smith, we're working on getting funding to implement a pilot program to really test out the viability of scaling up this initiative. Really important just from a financial standpoint and a climate standpoint too. And I'll leave it off at that for our grants right now. If anyone has any specific burning municipal needs, we can talk individually about those too. And we can pull up a brief presentation. I know, well, I've got your attention. Earlier this year, we had a small contract set up with LaBelle Associates to do a housing implementation strategy. That has been progressing. Essentially, the idea behind this initiative was to take the recommendations, the many that came out of this housing needs assessment, but were never really vetted as a board or as a committee to sort of understand what were more strategic. We're actually going through the process of understanding which of those are most applicable to Warren County, who the champions of each of those projects are, where the gaps are, and where Warren County can best be serving our residents with our attention and time, and whether that warrants the establishment of new policies and programs. But we will, in the next few months, have that more wrapped up for your review. But what I don't want to give anyone the impression that we're kicking the can down the road by saying, hey, we're working on a strategy. Actually, we've incorporated this housing needs assessment into all of our work over the past 6 months or so. Sarah just pulled together the 5 recommendations that came out of this housing needs assessment. And I just want to let you know where we're at with some of these things. So the first recommendation, add housing supply with focus on addressing identified housing gaps. We have our Thriving Hamlets initiative, which is going to be technical assistance for North Country municipalities to understand how they can meet their community goals through updating land use regulations and infrastructure investments. That was $100,000 to the DEC. Sarah has been working diligently to understand and keep the data alive. We basically had this idea of, hey, we need all these housing units. We have these things in the pipeline, but as you know, new things keep coming up every month. So Sarah's been coordinating people that we want to actually understand how the demand has adjusted since the publication of those numbers in October 23, and that will be online soon. Sarah Fruger has really taken the lead with this pro-housing certification. This is basically, it's an opportunity for a municipality to take a look at their land use regulations, get a better understanding of them, and then identify ways that they could be, I guess, more amenable to housing development in their communities, on their own terms, of course. Sarah has been working with communities to get this certification. Once you're certified, it gives municipalities an upper hand when it comes to access to grant funding and application evaluation. And then also, we are going through infrastructure funding applications, identifying opportunities to support the infrastructure that would support housing. This is really big. Sarah Frankenfeld is going to talk about this in more detail. Manage and proactively respond to changes in demand. The elephant in the room in this one, short-term rentals. The housing needs assessment said, hey, this is an issue, but we didn't have enough detail in that study to really move forward confidently on policy. Sarah's taken a deep dive into understanding the distribution of these short-term rentals and then the economic impacts. We'll get to that shortly. We're going to be hosting municipal workshops so we can talk to code enforcement officers, zoning enforcement officers, people that work on the day-to-day in communities that are administering these regulations so that we can understand what challenges and opportunities that they're encountering. And that ties in with short-term regulation analysis as well. Third recommendation, leverage existing capacity, local and regional. Again, you just approved that request item number 1. We're leveraging partnerships with Rebuilding Together Saratoga County. There's a lot of state and federal money that we have not been accessing in the last few years. We want to reopen that pipeline of funds and figure out the people that can effectively direct it to our community. So that's part of leveraging existing capacity. And we've been working with people like Beth Gillis, who's here today, Adirondack Roots, EDC, Warren Washington IDA, Chuck Barton, Jim Siplon. Like, there's so many different people that have started housing programs in the past year or so. Everyone's getting oriented, and we've been really focusing on reaching out to these people, figuring out who's doing what. And this is interesting that this came out of the housing needs assessment of developing a strategy to attract new residents. I think this has always been somewhat of a county goal in light of our demographic trends, but this does align with all the work that we're doing with our comprehensive planning, outdoor recreation economy plan, thriving hamlets. It's sort of cooked into what we do as a planning department. And the last one is leveraging opportunity zones, which we have not started to do at this point. So I just wanted to let you know, essentially, while we are waiting for the development of this final housing strategy, we are fully using this housing needs assessment and cooking it into our work and actually taking real action towards addressing these housing issues.
Okay, so as Ethan mentioned, the housing study took a sort of very high level look at short-term rentals in Warren County using some air DNA data that was available at the zip code level. But because we, as the county, have a short-term rental registration requirement, we were able to leverage that data and combine with our real property database to do a little bit of a deeper dive into an overview of our current short-term rental situation than what was presented in the housing study. So I'm just going to briefly go through that. This is all on a website, so if people want to spend more time reading all of the details, the link to the website will be available. So just starting out with where our short-term rentals are concentrated. I don't think it's a big surprise that we have the majority of short-term rental as a percentage of total housing units are found in the lake communities, also the town of Johnsburg. So as you can see, Lake George, Bolton, Hague, Johnsburg, have the highest percentage of their total housing units as short-term rentals, kind of that backbone down the middle of the county along the northway, the Hudson River. About 3% of their housing units are currently short-term rentals, and then Queensbury and Glens Falls, a smaller percentage, but still a fairly substantial number, especially in Queensbury, and then Stony Creek also. A fairly small number at this point. One thing of note, because our county is historically hosted seasonal vacation rentals. Back, all the way to the 30s and 40s, this has been a destination location for people having second homes, for coming up and renting cottages in the summer. A number of the communities along the lake have a fairly large stock of existing vacation rentals. For example, the town of Hague has about 3 times as many housing units as it does households. The town of Bolton has about 2.7 times as many housing units as it does households. Those excess housing units have historically and currently are second homes and vacation rentals. The problems start to arise when we have what have been traditionally more year-round communities that have a lower number of housing units, start to see this big influx of short-term rentals. So for example, Johnsburg, Thurman, Warrensburg, Queensbury, Glens Falls, Stony Creek, these communities do not have that huge excess number of housing units. So when those units that were previously year-round rentals or previously year-round units start to be converted to short-term rentals, that's when we really run into an issue with housing availability. Across the county, short-term rentals definitely, are responsible for driving up housing costs. So this chart here shows just, a nice bar chart of where the highest numbers of short-term rentals are located. The lake community is not a surprise. Johnsburg's definitely, struggling with having a big influx of short-term rentals. As far as where these short-term rentals are concentrated, not surprisingly, they're along the lake. So, about 1/3 of short-term rentals are lakeshore. Surprisingly, though, about 37% of the short-term rentals are located in denser neighborhood areas. So within the Adirondack Park Agency designated hamlets, and then within residential, typically year-round residential neighborhoods in Glens Falls and Queensbury. The remainder kind of scattered. Obviously, there's a lot of ski-related rentals up in the town of Johnsburg, lots of kind of seasonal townhomes that are short-term rentals. Most short-term rentals are single-family units. About 68% of the registered short-term rentals are single-family units. And then the others kind of vary through cottages, 2 to 3 family residences, seasonal residences, and mixed use. In Glens Falls, about 78% are single family. And about 8% of them are seasonal camps. So 28% of all the short-term rental properties have been purchased since the beginning of the pandemic. This is kind of a, phenomenal number. We've seen a big purchase of properties that are currently serving as short-term rentals. 43% have been purchased in the past decade, so since 2014. And in the communities of Lake George, Glens Falls, Stony Creek, and Thurman, over 50% of short-term rentals have been purchased in the last decade. Since 2020, 197 single-family residences have been purchased that are currently serving as short-term rentals. 73 of these are in hamlet or neighborhood areas. And the median purchase price of these houses was $339,000. So I think there's a conception that most short-term rentals are these big lakefront mansions that would not be affordable for local residents. While we certainly do have those properties serving as short-term rentals, it's not the majority of them. Another surprising, maybe not surprising statistic, but I found to be surprising that nearly 2/3 of the short-term rental properties have owners who don't live in Warren County. So while there are short-term rentals that are operated as businesses by local residents, the majority of them are being operated or owned by people who live outside of the county. Interestingly, Queensbury and Glens Falls have the highest percentage of locally owned short-term rentals. And then that really drops in the northern communities, especially Johnsburg. 74% are owned by out-of-county residents. Thurman, 75%, Hague, 75%. This chart here shows what percentage are owned locally, what percentage are owned outside the county. Short-term rentals make a lot of money. So the housing study using AirDNA data estimated that the average median monthly revenue was about $3,889 a month. And also identified that our highest rents in the county are below $3,000 a month, typically falling between $1,000 and $2,000 a month. So people can make more money operating a short-term rental than they can renting to a year-round resident. And I was able to verify this using occupancy tax receipts. The profitability ranges by community. Typically, a typical short-term rental property in Stony Creek is averaging revenue of about $16,500 per year, up to about $48,000 per year in the town of Lake George. Thurman, Warrensburg, and Lake George all have average annual revenues of over $40,000 per property. And about 2/3 of this total revenue, which is about $15.6 million in 2023, is going to out-of-county owners. So absent additional short-term rental regulations, the number of short-term rentals is likely to increase. Using AirDNA data in the housing study, the consultant estimated that short-term rentals increased by about 58% from the first quarter of 2020 to the first quarter of 2023. So our job now is figuring out what, if anything, we want to do to address this increase in short-term rentals. So a few steps: A, figuring out, do we want to regulate them? 2, what are the goals of the regulations if we do want to regulate them? And 3, should they be regulated at the county level, at the municipal level, or at a combination of county and municipal regulations? That being said, in the past 5 years, local municipalities have taken some initiatives to start regulating short-term rentals. I want to thank Matthew Smith, our junior planner. He put a lot of time and effort into wading through all of the regulations for all of the towns, and we put together a really nice inventory of what regulations each of the towns currently have in place. So currently 7 of the municipalities, those shown in dark blue on the map, do have some form of short-term rental regulation. And those range from just a simple registry up to restrictions on the number and location of units. So the towns of Bolton and Lake George are the only 2 who currently have restrictions based on zone. So those 2 municipalities limit development or only allow short-term rentals in specific zones within their communities. One town of Lake Luzerne, has a cap on their short-term rentals. They're capped at 120 units. And the town of Hague, which recently passed a short-term rental regulation, requires that a property owner have owned a property for 3 years before being eligible to use it as a short-term rental. So these are, you know, a kind of smattering of what the regulations are in each community. This map is interactive and provides a summary, again, that Matthew put together, a number of short-term rentals, percentage, and overview of the regulations in each community. Those are also summarized in a table at the bottom of this document, and there's a link to a spreadsheet you can download if you find this of interest for use in your town. In addition to these local regulations that are already in place, the county's housing strategy identified a number of actions that we may want to consider at the county level or at the local municipal level for continuing to manage short-term rentals. So just a couple of those for consideration are, a couple of these we already have, a registry. The state has also recently passed legislation through the state Senate and Assembly, but not yet signed by the governor, that will require short-term rentals to register at the state level. Again, as the town of Lake Luzerne is doing, one option is to cap the number of short-term rentals. Another option is to increase licensing fees and use that money to develop housing and transportation services for year-round residents. Some other communities throughout the country have had success with that. Another option is to use some of the occupancy tax money collected from the short-term rentals to develop year-round housing for local residents. And a final idea is to develop an incentive program for short-term rental owners to convert their short-term rentals to year-round rentals, essentially kind of bridging the gap between the amount of money that they're receiving via short-term rental revenue and what they could receive from renting to a year-round resident on the local market. So these are all strategies that have been tried successfully in other locations, things that we can consider and discuss.
Will you explain that last one more time? Bridging the gap of short-term rental and year-round rental. Say that again.
Yeah, so a number of communities have put programs into place that will, they require funding, a funding source. So that could either be through the county or a local municipality that would essentially pay a short-term rental owner to rent to a year-round resident as opposed to continuing to operate their property as a short-term rental. So if they're making, for example, $3,889 a month, operating a short-term rental, and they could get $2,500 a month off renting to a year-round resident, there are programs in place that would pay that gap.
A $1,300 gap.
Well,
Yeah.
and it's
Or
not,
a
for example.
percentage of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it can be a percentage too. It's part of the incentive too, is like not having to hire people to do the turnover and organizing the tenants that come in every weekend too. And there are people, I think, actually in the park that are working on these programs as we speak. That the nice part about that is that's incentive based as opposed to regulatory, which is from a county perspective is attractive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sarah mentioned the state registry. That's Senate Bill 885B that was passed. That it passed along party lines on the last day of the legislature. And it's the governor's party, so there was expectation she would sign it. This is the one that says you can also collect sales tax on short-term rentals. Apparently, yesterday at Intercounty, a NISAC rep was there, and he brought us up to date on that. And apparently, there's an objection or there's pushback about the state registry. And by I guess the short-term rental owners and everything wondering basically what happens next. I have to register my short-term rental with the state. Then is the state going to impose other things on us because we've registered? So it's kind of, and he just kind of went like this, 50-50 right now, whether that's going to pass or be signed by the governor. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as short-term rental, the definition now, as far as paying sales tax, is it less than 30 days? Because before that was passed, I believe it was 7 days. If you rented say a cabin for 7 days, you weren't required to pay sales tax. Now, the legislation that just got passed, is that 30 days or less for sales tax for short-term rental? Did they redefine that?
I'm looking right.
And I'm curious because I'm getting asked that question like George.
Well,
I
he's
thought it was
looking-
less than 30 days, but I'd hate to answer that. Robert's not here. I'll keep looking
Okay,
on the website
yeah.
while we're continuing the meeting. I'll let you.
You know, I should be the person against short-term rentals, right? Owning hotels, but you know, you know, as far as rights go, if in Lake George, if you got a zone that's commercial, it's allowed, whether it's competition or not. If it's a residential zone, it's not allowed, you know, but we have so many different zones that it would be hard for the county ever to try and regulate that, because Lake George has mixed use zones all over the place, so. Keep
Yeah.
that in mind as we move forward on that discussion on, you know, county regulation on how far that goes.
Yeah, that actually, yeah, then your town does have one of the more progressive examples of how this could be done.
Yeah.
You have a professional staff that can help with it, and it took some, I know there were some growing pains to get it in place too.
There
but-
were, and still are,
Yeah,
and we have more than the
Uh,
130, we have more than the 130 permits out there, you know. So
yeah,
I think
and,
that matters, but
and to that point, actually, we're organizing the roundtable with, you know, CEOs, CEOs, and just to talk between the different communities about what's working well, what's working, you know, what there's some key themes through there, that we can have lessons learned, so people from different communities can come together and talk about it,
yeah,
and, hope to have your planner will be a participant.
good.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Taflin was going to read just a little excerpt from.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the definition in the legislation, short-term residential rental unit means an entire dwelling unit or a room, group of rooms, other living or sleeping space, or any other space within a dwelling made available for rent by guest for less than 30 consecutive days, where the unit is offered for tourist or transient use by the short-term rental host of the residential unit.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Mr. Stroud, did you have your hand?
Yes, Sarah, do you use the information gleaned from our connection with Granicus?
So that's an excellent question. We actually met with our county treasurer when we were working on this project, and we have not yet received the information from Granicus, but as soon as that is available, definitely we'll look forward to updating that with that new information available. One of the really fantastic things that we learned in conversation with the treasurer is that data from Granicus will include a calendar so that we'll have a good idea of the number of rental nights associated with each one of the short-term rentals. One thing that was interesting looking at this data was just the wide variability in occupancy tax receipts. So it's clear that a good chunk of these short-term rental properties are being very regularly used and have high occupancy and are really being run as a business. But there are definitely a subset of short-term rentals for which that's not the case, for which it appears that there's just, you know, a handful of room nights happening over the course of the year. And those might be ones that we want to, you know, potentially encourage owners to consider converting back to a year-round rental.
Ethan, could you, to put you on the spot, in 2 or 3 sentences, summarize the posture of the draft comprehensive plan as it relates to short term, or would it be premature to do that?
What I can say from the comprehensive plan, 2 or 3 sentences, you know, housing is a really big challenge for our residents. One of the highest valued things for Warren County residents is sense of community. One of the larger threats people are encountering are declining school enrollments, that loss sense of community. And we certainly see from the housing needs assessment and the steeper dive that we've been taking that there certainly is an interaction between unregulated short-term rentals and, you know, the viability of housing stock for long-term residents that support our community. So yeah, you would say there's an interest in this, but we have not moved towards some policy recommendation. That was way more than 2 sentences, sorry.
Yeah. Any other discussion? Items? Beth Gillis is here from the Lake Champlain, Lake George Regional Planning Board. Did you want to give an update, Beth?
Thanks, everyone. So I'm Beth Gillis. I think I know everybody in here. I'm the Executive Director of the Lake Champlain Lake George Regional Planning Board. And I just wanted to give you a quick 6-month update on what we've been up to in 2024. So I'm gonna skip over broadband because we all talked about that a couple weeks ago, and move on to workforce housing. So we have a really robust regional workforce housing program going, working with nonprofit developers, and the RPCs throughout the Adirondacks. And so in the work that we've done from our housing study, and synthesizing that down, we really are looking at 3 buckets. So the issues, right, with workforce housing are availability and affordability, and then we're also talking about ownership and renters. So we've started a technical assistance to communities about it. So we are working on a zoning best management practices guide. We have synthesized down the APA regulations for housing development within hamlets and moderate intensity zones, just to try to make it a little more understandable and what you would have to do if you were looking to develop housing within those. That guide is going to speak to several different buckets. So communities that have their own zoning and how that might be inadvertently reducing the types of housing that can be placed in certain parts of a community. The communities that don't have their own zoning, so they follow the APA regulations. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what you can and can't do in a hamlet and a moderate intensity zone. And so we're working on some build out analyses just to show what could happen. And then we're also going to, encourage any communities that want to talk about getting zoning, what best practices they could use and what zoning could be available to them, or zoning choices, so that they could understand if they did want to on their own zoning. So we're doing that. Again, Ethan already mentioned the Pro Housing Initiative. We're also helping communities do that. As part of the North Country Regional Economic Development Council plan update, I know Warren and Washington in our region are in Capital District, not North Country. But in that process, we worked with the North Country REDC to include a chapter on workforce housing in their plan. And part of that was a technical assistance program that the Regional Planning Board would provide to communities. The one thing we did do when we put that together was we talked about that if it gets funded, it's not part of the 10 million that was funded. It's a separate initiative. If it gets funded, we talked about working with all the communities in the Adirondacks. So there are actually, the Adirondacks are in 3 state regional economic development council areas. So Mohawk, Capital, and North Country. And we thought it was really important that any work that we're doing in an Adirondack community is regardless of what REDC it's in. And so that's been really well received. And we're still continuing to work to get that program funded. Pre-development. So we are working with a multitude of communities on pre-development. So we have realized through the work and talking to for-profit developers, nonprofit developers, the for-profit developers will spend money on pre-development, the time and the effort, if they know that there's a big financial return at the end. That doesn't happen in the Adirondacks. So we have kind of taken on the role of pre-development, getting grant funding to do pre-development on municipally owned properties and basically treating them like an industrial park. So you get a piece of property, you get all the infrastructure set up, you get all the permits, you get everything you need, and then just handing that to either a for-profit developer, nonprofit developer, anyone who's interested, to say, here, develop housing. A big part of that work is working with the community from day one to make sure that what we're talking about and what could be developed there is something that the community wants, the type of housing the community wants, the size of housing the community wants. So we got a $300,000 grant. We have worked with Adirondack Roots. We do have 4 communities already chosen for that project, 1 in Hamilton, 3 in Essex County. But we are searching, and my next slide, I'll tell you about something else that'll help for that. So that's our pre-development work. And then we have our workforce housing revolving loan funds. We got a $500,000 grant from the Northern Border Regional Commission to give low interest loans to renovate and rehab. You can't just do a purchase, but it could be part of the process for vacant long-term rental units. So we're not going to rehab existing units that someone is already in. This is to get new units online. And really the impetus behind this program, we have our small business loan fund. If someone were to buy a building in a hamlet that was empty and it's got first floor commercial, second floor, third floor residential, if you had come to us for a loan, we could only give you money to renovate the bottom commercial floor in our existing business loan fund. We cannot do residential with that money. So we're hoping to couple this loan fund so that we can get a full hamlet building renovated back online. It gets long-term rentals, commercial space, but most importantly, we want it to be an anchor project. We want it to be a catalyst for redevelopment in our hamlets. So we're hoping, I'm hoping my board approves the program in a couple of weeks at our board meeting, and if they do, we're hoping to have it out on the street at the end of July. This I'm super excited about. Working with Adirondack Roots, we put in a $3 million request under the congressionally directed spending program. And our project was chosen by Congresswoman Stefanik as one of the 15 that she moved forward to committee. Even more exciting, I found out yesterday, not only has it made it through the first hurdle, the Transportation, Housing and Urban Development Subcommittee approved the project to move forward to the Appropriations Committee, but the Congresswoman's staff worked to increase the project ask to $5 million. So it's moving forward as a $5 million project to the regional planning, $5 million grant to the regional planning board to work on pre-development, community outreach and construction rehabilitation of existing and new units. So it's still got a long way to go in the congressional appropriations process, but we're really excited that it's moving forward. Adirondack Day in May down in Albany, we were asked to head up the housing display. And so we tried to make it fun because we thought we just stand there like, hey, who wants to talk about housing? So we made a board game. It was pretty silly, but it was really well received. We have Assemblyman Simpson, Assemblyman Jones, Gary Douglas. We had a whole bunch of people come over and play our board game. You got a little chocolate house when you were done. And it just asked questions for information that came out of our housing study. We've had a 0.1% increase in development in the last 10 years. 81 or 82% of the homes in Hamilton County are second homes. And, you know, those kind of things to really illustrate to the folks in Albany, even though the pictures of all of our friends, we did have people who didn't know us come play it, and just to really illustrate to them what the housing landscape looks like in the Adirondack. So in Albany, they truly understand what we're dealing with versus the rest of the state. Moving on to transportation, we were awarded a Safe Streets for All grant for transportation. We're actually doing two plans. One, we're doing the Adirondack Gateway, which is Warren, Washington, and the town of Moreau. And right now we're in our public outreach. And so we want your opinion. So that QR code will bring you to a place that you can actually provide us with information on intersections or places within Warren County that you think are unsafe for bike, ped, even, you know, car on car transportation issues. And so we're also doing a North Country. So we grouped Hamilton, Essex, and Clinton together in one plan, and we did Warren, Washington, and Moreau because the AGFTC, the PO area, and a southern one. So take that QR code and give some opinions. We'd really appreciate it. Economic development, our infrastructure projects that Jess manages for us, the North Creek Sewer Project, the North Creek Ski Bowl, Warrensburg pre-development planning for water, Warren County culvert assessment. And even though it's not located in Warren County, we're working with the Warren, Washington IDA. We secured all the funding for the Canal Side Energy Park. That's work that's going underway in Fort Edward. And then grant applications in Warren County for this year, the Loon Lake Dam repair, and then also the Village of Lake George Septic Receiving Improvement Project is the WQIP we're going to put in for the village. Community development, we are currently working on, and this is the work that Allison does, currently working on the Town of Johnsburg comprehensive plan. We just started the Town of Horicon comp plan, and we've secured the funding and are working through the contracting for the Town of Chester comp plan. We also received funding for the Town of Horicon to do a Brant Lake watershed management plan through the Department of State LWRP program. Sam's finishing up the town of Bolton DWSP2. That's a drinking water source protection program. It's a state program. All surface and groundwater municipal systems are going to need a DWSP2 plan. We did Lake George, we've done Bolton, we did Argyle. So we're looking for new communities. Eventually you will have to do it. So reach out to us if you're interested. We've also been helping the town and the village of Lake George work through the new MS4 permit, which came out, I think, the week between Christmas and New Year's. They're like, hey, it's only been 15 years. Here's your new MS4 permit. But we've been working with Dan and Keith on that. Community projects underway, library preservation project in Horicon. We got funding for a new park project in Lake George. And Allison also secured funding for an Eastern Hemlock identification assessment and prioritization in the Lake George watershed. This is looking at our existing hemlocks with the threat of the hemlock woolly adelgid coming in and what that's going to do to our watershed as an invasive species. We are also updating our Lake Champlain non-point source pollution plans. This is a plan we did in 2018. It was focused on identifying projects that would reduce phosphorus in the Lake Champlain watershed, which Happy Brook, Lake George are parts of that watershed. We're updating that project list now. We've actually secured a lot of funding since 2018 to get projects implemented, and we're at the point where like we need new projects that we can then apply for grants for. So this is actually right now we're doing community outreach. So this is a community outreach QR code, but if you have projects or have ideas, please email one of us at the planning board and we'll make sure it gets in the plan. And our loan fund, this year, 2024, we've approved 2 loans. One is in Warrensburg. We did deny one loan, or the committee denied one loan. And we actually sent that business owner into our small business technical assistance program to work through the business plan and the financial projections. So we're hoping in a couple months that loan will come back with just a better plan. Currently have one in underwriting. It's in St. Lawrence County. Our small business technical assistance program. So this is the $150,000 we received in Warren County ARPA money. We also secured $99,000 from USDA, and Washington County also gave us $25,000 for this project. So right now we have 7 businesses in the program. 7 have completed. We did have one in Essex County cancel out. She just ended up having family commitment. She couldn't put in the time, but just so you know, the Warren County ARPA money is used for the Warren County businesses, which there are 7 of them out of the 15 in Glens Falls, Queensbury, Chester, and Warrensburg. So we're moving on this.
Questions for Beth? Thank you, Beth.
Okay.
Any public comment, privilege of the floor from the public? Hearing none, anything else from the committee? Make a motion to adjourn. Mr. Drow and Ms. Turner, we are adjourned.